410 will be our first song. Hymn number 410. Let us sing. He leadeth me, the blessed of the word, with heavenly comfort from. Whate'er I do, where'er I be, still 'tis God's hand that leadeth me. He leadeth me by his own hand, he leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by his hand he leadeth me. Sometimes it seems the deepest gloom, sometimes where Eden's flowers bloom. I wander still o'er troubled sea, still 'tis God's hand that leadeth me. He leadeth me by his own hand, he leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by his hand he leadeth me. And when my task on earth is done, when by thy grace the victory's won, in death's cold way I will not flee, since God through Jordan leadeth me. He leadeth me by his own hand, he leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by his hand he leadeth me. I'm just looking at my choice. Let's sing number 613. 613. Time is filled with swift transition, not other than who can stand. Build your hopes on things eternal, oh, through God's unchanging hand. Oh, through God's unchanging hand. Oh, through God's unchanging hand, build your hopes on things eternal. Oh, through God's unchanging hand, trust in him who will not leave you, whatsoever years may bring. If my earthly friends forsake us, still more closely to him cling. Oh, through God's unchanging hand. Oh, through God's unchanging hand. If the hopes on things eternal. Oh, to God's unchanging hand. When your journey is completed, if somehow you have been through, and right the home in glory, your enraptured soul will view. Oh, through God's unchanging hand. Oh, through God's unchanging hand. Lift your hopes on things eternal. Oh, through God's unchanging hand. 469. 469. Encamped along the hills of life, ye Christian soldiers ride, and press the battle ere the night shall veil the glowing sky. Against the velvet veils below, let all be heard. Faith is the victory we know that overcomes the world. Faith, faith. The victory, oh, glorious victory, overcomes the world. His banner over us is love, our sword, the word of God. We tread the road, the saints above, with shouts of triumph prod. By faith they like a whirlwind thread, swept over every field. The faith by which they conquered death is still our shining shield. Faith is the victory. Faith is the victory. Oh, glorious victory that overcomes the world. To him that overcomes the foe, right reigneth shall be given. Before the angels he shall know his name confessed in heaven. Then onward from the hills of light, our hearts with love of flame will vanquish all the hosts of night in Jesus' conquering name. Faith is the victory. Faith is the victory. Oh, glorious victory that overcomes the world. 909 will be the lesson, the song after lesson. In number 909.
So Daniel chapter 8. Remember last week, if you're in here, how I said sometimes you don't want to be trying to pinpoint things and just accepting them in the new and getting exact. Well, Daniel chapter 8 just violates that rule altogether. And part of the reason is why is because God actually explains most of it. So we can sit there and take what God explains and look at history and say, here is this event, or here is this person, and go from there. And it's an interesting thing. Now, the skeptic would have us to believe, because of Daniel chapter 8 and Daniel chapter 11, that Daniel must have been written after the events. Here is the problem with that. Anybody ever heard of the Septuagint? Who ordered the Septuagint?
70.
The 70 is what it means. 70 scholars were ordered to translate the Hebrew Bible, Hebrew scriptures, into Greek, Koine Greek to be exact. But who was it that ordered it to be done? Because that is very important. Very prominent Greek person.
Only Philadelphia was the one that had it recorded for his library in Alexandria.
He had it recorded, but who was the original one that said to have it done? In fact, what he did was he had it transcribed, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, it came about from Alexander the Great himself. And both of those, which we mentioned, were prior to part of the events in Daniel chapter 8. So if the Septuagint, which was a complete work of the Old Testament, just as we have today, was done prior to some of the events, that meant that Daniel could not have been written afterwards. As in, it wasn't written looking back. It was truly a prophecy. So, and we'll point out those as we get to them. So here is the start. It gives us a time. In the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after the one that appeared to me the first time. When was the first one he had? Daniel chapter 7 is what we looked at. That would be the first one. Any idea when that was? Anybody remember? The first year of King Belshazzar. This is the third year. Who's king in Daniel chapter 5? King Belshazzar. This is the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. Supposedly he co-reigned, best we can tell, he co-reigned with his father, and he reigned probably 12 to 15 years. So this would put the events that he's about to describe, the first part of the events, 15 years, it's about 12 years from the first events. Now, understand that there's actually 3 events in Daniel 8 in this prophecy. Okay? It says, I saw in the vision, and it so happened while I was looking that I was in Shushan, the citadel, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in the vision that I was by the river Ulai. Okay? Some will question whether he was actually in Shushan or in the vision he was in Shushan. Now, it is also named by another name of Susa, but does anybody know where else Shushan is mentioned in the Bible? In fact, the citadel is even mentioned. Esther. The events of Esther took place in Shushan, which would become the capital of the Persian Empire. So I take it, notice the first thing he says, I saw in the vision. And it so happened while I was looking that I was in Shushan. And you ever sit there and have a dream where suddenly you're somewhere? I had a dream last night. I was in this building and none of y'all were here. Well, a whole bunch of people in here, nobody I knew. I never saw them before in my life. So, weird dream. But anyway, and believe me, I was looking for y'all. What was going on? So here is the point that he's saying. He looked around and here's where he was. And the only way he could actually know that was that God revealed to him that he was in the Shushan. or he was in Shushan, and he was in the citadel. And these things in the name. From what I found in history, Shushan had been destroyed by the Assyrians, and it wasn't rebuilt until Cyrus the Great started rebuilding it. So that meant it wasn't rebuilt at this time, which makes it a part of the vision, which makes it another wondrous little thing. This isn't advancing. So what we want to do is keep in mind these things. And I took title out of my New King James Study Bible, Defending for the Faith, Amazing Predictive Prophecy. People often say, why should we believe the Bible? Well, if you can give prophecy approximately 400 years in advance and do it in stages that show it, you have to have divine help. And if Daniel had that divine help that says, this is the word of God and we should pay attention to it. Okay? So starting verse 3. Then I lifted my eyes. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go through and make a few little comments here and there. But since God saw fit to let Gabriel, the angel, tell Daniel what it meant, we're going to go through that before we go into the historical. Okay? Not hysterical, historical. Okay? Then I lifted my eyes and saw, and there standing beside the river was a ram which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward, northward, and southward. If the ram's pushing westward, northward, and southward, which way is it coming from? From the east. Okay? So that no animal could withstand him, nor was there any that could deliver from his hand, but he did according to his will and became great. And as I was considering, suddenly a male goat came from the west, across the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. Then he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing beside the river, and ran at him with power. And I saw him confronting the ram. He was moved with rage against him, attacked the ram, and broke his 2 horns. There was no power in the ram to withstand him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled him, and there was no one that could deliver the ram from his hand. Therefore, the male goat grew very great, but when he became strong, the large horn was broken. And in place of it, 4 notable ones came up toward the 4 winds of heaven. And out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land. Who would be the glorious land? Israel, Judea, Jerusalem. And it grew up to the host of heaven. It cast down some of the hosts and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. He even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host. And by him the daily sacrifices were taken away, and the place of the sanctuary was cast down. Because of transgression, an army was given over to the horn to oppose the daily sacrifices, and he cast troops down to the ground. He did all this and prospered. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that certain one who was speaking, how long will the vision be concerning the daily sacrifices and the transgression of desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot? And he said to me, for 2,300 days, then the sanctuary will be clean. How long is 2,300 days? Huh? A long time?
6.3.
Huh?
6.3 years.
6.3 years. About 6.5 years. Okay? there is a point there of how long things were allowed to do. It is more likely that this is meant of the time, but not a holy time. Okay? So if you're Daniel and you've seen this vision, you've seen all these things, what are you thinking? What's the sanctuary? Even Daniel's getting this part without, you understand that when it's talking about these things, and it's going to even the temple, the high priest, the sacrifices. Now, Gabriel explains the prophecy. Then it happened when I, Daniel, had seen the vision, was seeking the meaning, that suddenly there stood before me one having the appearance of a man. Okay? Didn't say he was a man, had the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, who called and said, now notice this, it says, I heard a man's voice, and that voice is actually calling to the man that he saw, or the appearance of the man he saw. Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. How many angels have names in the Bible? Paul said it, 2. Who's the other one? Michael. Michael and Gabriel, that's it. And they both appear in Daniel. Gabriel is the same one that will appear to Mary and to Zacharias, John the Baptist's father. And Michael is the only other one named, and he's named a Jew that he contended with the devil over Moses' body. Indicating that Michael is probably the one who buried Moses' body. Okay? Now notice, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell on my face. But he said to me, understand, son of man, that the vision refers to the end of time. Literally here, he's saying, son of man, you are a human. Okay? Now, as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep with my face to the ground, but he touched me and stood me upright. And he said, look, I am making known to you what shall happen in the latter time of the indignation, for at the appointed time the end shall be. Okay? So there's a point they're making. What is the end that he's talking about? Notice he says that the vision refers to the time of the end. Not the end of time, but the time of the end. Does that make a big difference? It does. The end of time would mean the end of the world. But the time of the end is a time when these things are to come to an end. And he points that out when we get down in there. There, notice, for at the appointed time the end shall be. See, in the latter time of the indignation, and for at the appointed time the end shall be, he's talking about the end of the indignation. That abomination of desolation that is spoken about. And notice, here's the first of the 3 things that Daniel saw. The ram which you saw having 2 horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia. Who's in control right now? And Belshazzar, who is he reigning for? No. No. This is before them. This is actually in the time of Belshazzar, his 3rd year reign. This is still the Babylonian Empire. So the Medes and the Persians. In fact, what is going on right now, as Daniel is being told this, the Medes are ruling over the Persians, and the Persians are struggling to get that power. So by the time that they come together and form this ran. We call it the Medo-Persian Empire. Cyrus the Great has gained control, and the Medes are actually subservient to the Persians. Hence, the bigger horn that came up last. The Medes served first, or were controlled first. We'll look at that when we get down. The male goat is the kingdom of Greece. That's pretty specific, isn't it? In Daniel's time, what was Greece? A bunch of Greek states. Nothing to it. Little individual power struggles among themselves. Notice, the large horn that is between its eyes is the first king. The first one to ignite it. As for the broken horn, the four that stood up in its place, 4 kingdoms shall arise out of that nation, but not with its power. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their fullness, a king shall arise having fierce features, who understands sinister schemes. What do we associate sinister with? Evil. That's going to be an evil person. His power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. He shall destroy fearfully and shall prosper and thrive. He shall destroy the mighty and also the holy people. Through his cunning he shall cause deceit to prosper under his rule, and he shall exalt himself in his heart. He shall destroy many in their prosperity. He shall even rise against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without human means. And the vision of the evenings and mornings which was told is true. Therefore seal up the vision, for it refers to many days in the future. And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick for days. Afterward I arose and went about the king's business. I was astonished by the vision, but no one understood it. Now he was told to seal it up, but here's the deal. Did he tell people about it? Obviously he did, because it says no one understood it. And that was the point of telling him to seal it up, because no one's going to. It's future events. So this is the full description of it. So let's go ahead and we'll start. Everybody I consulted at the approximate time of the vision to begin about 551 BC, or that it was given to Daniel. This will be about 12 years before the events of chapter 5. Okay? We point out Shushan will be the capital of the Medo-Persian Empire, which would be from 483 to 473 BC. The events of Esther are from 483 to 473 BC. It's about 10 years in there. We kind of read through it like it took all place all at once, but there were some things that led up to other points that we just don't realize how much time has taken place sometimes. And I think this dating might actually be that Esther took place in between those years, somewhere around this time. Okay? As we mentioned, Persia is the taller horn. Persia rose up in about 550 and would stand until 331 BC, while the Medes had rose to power. And it was interesting, they had joined with Nebuchadnezzar's father. Okay. Nebuchadnezzar's father to defeat the Assyrians. And then after that, they went their way and Babylon went its way. Okay? But then Babylon did start imposing power upon the Medes, and they kept trying to overthrow that power. The problem they had was they were fighting two things. They're trying to fight Babylon. They're trying to fight the Persians. The Persians would end up coming up, not necessarily taken away. And if you find some of that time frame, you'll find Persian kings with Mede soldiers standing behind them. They became a fighting force. So together, they defeated Babylon in 539 BC under the leadership of Cyrus the Great. Now, who is Cyrus the Great?
He's the one that the slave built.
He's the one that gave the order that the Jews could go back to Jerusalem. Okay? Brought in. The he-goat. As it told us, that's Greece. Greece originally came in power as a world power. It kind of started before this, around 331 to 63 BC. The Great Horn was Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great began ruling over it about 331 BC, and he would start to lead his conquest, initially attacking the Persians, and would be completely conquered the world, the known world, by 323 BC. He wanted to go into India, but his soldiers were tired of fighting and wanted to go home. And in heading back, he had built ships to go and explore the northern African continent, which he had conquered all the way down to Egypt. And he took ill and died. Some suspect he was poisoned. Historians say it was probably appendicitis. But either way, he took ill and died. He's the Great Horn. If you look at it took him less than 10 years, or just over 10 years, to conquer the known world. Thus, he's described as not touching the ground. One of the first things he did when he got to Palestine, and this is interesting, the Palestine area, he defeated Tyre in a 7-month siege. It was an island fortress. Tyre and Sidon. And it was interesting because what they would do is they'd be in the city of Sidon. When they were attacked, they'd go out there to the island, their fortress island, and they'd withstand the attacks. Well, what he did was he leveled the city of Sidon and used it to build a causeway out to the island so he could seize the island of Tyre. And it's interesting that God would tell Tyre you'll be nothing but as a place for fishermen to lay their sails. And guess what you see today? Fishermen trying out their sails and nets on that island, what's left of it. After the death of Alexander, Greece struggled with people trying to take control. There was one general who was over Assyria that looked to be winning, and suddenly he was assassinated. So it ended up these 4 generals, after that, divided the Grecian Empire among themselves. Cassander took Macedonia. Cassander also, Alexander had but one living heir who was of a foreign woman, as they put it, not a Grecian. Cassander killed her and the son, who was about 12 years old. Lysimachus ruled over Greece and Bithynia, Bithynia being part of Asia Minor. Seleucus, the first Nicator, received Syria and Old Babylon. Ptolemy the first, Soter, Egypt, which included Palestine. This is important. Josephus records that when Alexander, after attacking Tyre, set his sights toward Egypt, came toward Palestine, was shown by the elders of Jerusalem who went out to meet him this prophecy. And that he was to take Egypt and go on to Persia. And he heeded it. So because they submitted to his rule, being glad to get out from under Persian rule, which Egypt did the same thing. There wasn't even a battle in Egypt. They just surrendered and said, hey, boom, we want out of this. We'll serve you. He treated the Jews, Judea and Jerusalem very cordially. Okay? When he died, Ptolemy did the same thing. And the generals who succeeded him had treated them very well. Somewhere, this is after the carrying away, the rulers, people of Judea, the Jews, started going back into some of their old ways. They started accepting things they were told not to accept. They started doing the same thing. You remember the book of Judges? Philistines would conquer them. God would send a savior. They'd cry out, promise to be good, and God would send somebody to rescue them, and they'd be good for a while, then they'd go back to their old ways. Well, this is the same thing that happened then. They started going up and back. About the time of the Maccabees, this little horn, Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth. Now notice the date. 175, 164 BC. Hold on a second, I want to check. I promised Lisa I'd leave. Okay, they are keeping Larry another night. And that's the only reason I had this up here. In fact, I usually leave it at home on Wednesday nights. But I promise her I'd leave it turned on in case any news for Larry. Pardon? Are you reading? Okay.
Exactly what that guy did.
Yeah, this is pretty much what he did, and we'll explain why. Now, and out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south. He actually had inherited the rule of Syria and Old Babylon, but he wanted Palestine and Egypt too. And so he ended up conquering them. And notice it says, exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land. Judea and Jerusalem. And it grew up to the host of heaven. It cast down some of the hosts and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. That is not referring to God or the literal stars. This is one of those figurative things. But those who served in the host of the heaven. High priest. The priest of God that served in the temple. And notice the point. It says trampled them. Brother Daughtery in his commentary says that he had killed somewhere around 100, and let me see if I can find it. About 100,000 Jews. Let's see where, yeah. He slaughtered thousands of Jews. It said he massacred over 100,000 men, women, and children of the Jews. Josephus says that he killed circumcised babies and hung them around their mother's neck, using them to strangle their own mothers.
Wow.
Because he was that evil. He was trying to stamp out Judaism. This Antiochus Epiphanes IV. So he probably didn't do it personally, but he had ordered it done. Who do you think's behind him? Obviously the devil. If the devil can destroy Judaism, what does he stop? He stops the coming of the Christ. That's the goal. Notice he even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host. Literally talking about as the high priest. And by him the daily sacrifices were taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. He ordered a sow to be slaughtered and offered on the altar. The abomination. And then he built a statue of Jupiter to stand in place in the temple courtyard. False god. God he looked at. Yeah. Yeah, any false god, that's the one he probably believed in and served. So it tells us that because the transgression army was given over to the horn to oppose the daily sacrifice, and he cast truth down to the ground, he did all this and prospered. How many years are in the intertestamental time? A little over 400. Huh? Yeah. A little over 400. 500, right in that area, 400 years. Yeah, interesting enough, all about the same amount of time they were in Egypt. And since you brought up that parallel, Ron, what were they doing when God sent Moses to deliver them out of Egypt? Well, okay, but what were they doing to God? No. They were crying for help. They were crying out for help. They were crying out to God to deliver them from this. Okay? Well, when John the Baptist comes on the scene, they were crying again. They were crying for a prophet because it had been 400 years since they had had a prophet. When people who truly want to serve God get bound and it becomes difficult, they stay faithful. But then what does it do to others who start to realize how much they need God? They start to pay attention. Because of transgressions. And this is in that intertestamental time. This is waking them up to say, hey, just because you are God's chosen people, as in God's people chose to bring the Messiah, that's what it literally means, does not mean you will not suffer. It kind of defeats that idea that once saved, always saved. No, it says because of transgression. This is actually part of a payment for sins. I notice. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their fullness, a king shall arise and big speaker who understands sinister schemes. He shall be mighty, but not by his own power. Alexander Great rose up through his own power, showing great leadership. This man did not. I kind of like Brother Daughtry's point. He was a very skilled politician. And that's how he came to power. And he used that power to destroy and to put people and scare them into fear, including the holy people. Notice, through his cunning he shall cause deceit to prosper under his rule, and he shall exalt himself in his heart. This is this man. This is you look this man up and you read him in any context, and this is what you find. Nobody that I found says anything good about him. But now here's the other important part. But he shall be broken without human means. What does that mean?
And God tells us.
And God. How did Ahab die? Anybody remember? God told him if he went into battle, he'd die. He got shot with an arrow. A lot of these kings and stuff, in fact, like Jezebel, God had ordered her to be killed. Other things. By human hands, they died. Not him. Most of the evil kings we read about were either assassinated or committed suicide throughout history. Not him. He didn't die in battle. He just suddenly took ill and died.
Have I ever said that he, after the Maccabees defeated him in Judea, that he got on a boat to try to escape and drown in the ocean?
No, I haven't found that one, but here in, I believe this is from Brother Kyle Betts. Antigonus did not divide battle as many ancient kings did, but nor was assassinated by conspirators. In fact, Antigonus did not die in the hands of any other human. Instead, he died of sickness. And Brother Daughtery confers with that. So these are the accounts I looked at. And so, but even I kind of would wonder about if he drowned, if that might be considered human being. If somebody like this, they might actually push him over. You'd have that question. God could make the boat rock. Well, Jonah told them to toss him overboard. But one thing's for sure, I like this part. God says he's not dying by any human hands. He's dying by my hand. Drowning is possibly God's hand, so could be. I mean, it's according to what documentation there is. I didn't look up their documentation, and it could be either way. But here's the deal: he didn't die in battle. He didn't die by human hands, human means. It fits, and the other thing that Brother Daughtery points out, and it really is, it was so much of an overwhelming prophecy vision and dealing with an angel that Daniel was just surely exhausted. It left him exhausted. Final point. Brother Rex Turner lists 13 things from Josephus that took place in Jerusalem during the time of Antigonus' control. Antigonus obtained possession of the city of Jerusalem through those of his own party. He vandalized the temple and left it bare. He forbade the Jews to offer daily sacrifices. He burnt down the finest buildings. He built a citadel in the lower part of the city where the wicked part of the Jews dwelt. He built an idol upon God's altar. He slew a swine and offered them upon the altar. He compelled the Jews to forsake the Jewish order of worship. He compelled the Jews to raise idol altars in every city and village to offer swine on them every day. He forbade the Jews from circumcising their sons. He caused to be whipped with rods and torn to pieces those who did not adhere to his instructions. He caused to be strangled those women and their sons whom they circumcised, hanging their sons about their necks. He destroyed all the sacred books of the law as they were found from 165 to 166. Yeah, faithful Jews destroyed them. All this he did. All this God said he would do. So when we look at these and we say God said he would do and God did it, when we look at the New Testament, we need to understand what God said he will do, he's going to do. Let's stand and sing.
There's a fountain free is for you and me. Let us haste away to its spring. Is a fountain of love from the source of life, and he bids us all freely drink. Will you come to the fountain free? Will you come? Is for you and me, thirsty soul. Hear the fountain call, hear the fountain open for all.
Mike, would you lead us in a prayer? Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for another time that we can be here to listen to a section of your holy word. And discern its meaning for us. Lord, as we go through the rest